Coming up next after this break is Amelia Nakitimbo reporting the security situation in Uganda after the election. Do join us again. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still on Public Intel, and we still have Victor Iwala very much in the studio. Now over to Uganda. The opposition leader, Robert Kyagulanyi, popularly known as Bobi Wine, has called on Uganda's development partners not to recognize the result of last week's presidential election, which he said was undermined by widespread illegalities. According to Wine, he said his party has evidence to prove the election was fraudulent, including ballot box stuffing by the Uganda military, which he said also ordered people to vote for President Yoweri Museveni on election day. Wine, a popular musician turned politician, said it was the military, not the Electoral Commission, that oversaw the January 14th presidential election. He said he will be present, or rather he will present the election or the evidence to the world as soon as the internet is restored in Uganda, which was restored on Monday. We are going to show the world the evidence of our claim to victory, he said. On this note, we have Amelia Nakitimbo, a journalist from Uganda, ready to feed us with reports. Thank you very much for joining us, Amelia. Now, according to Bobi Wine, he alleged there had been lots of irregularities, but Mr. Museveni called it Uganda's fairest ever vote. What would you have to say about this as a journalist living in Uganda?
Well, whereas election day passed fairly peacefully and in a mature way, as some of our international observers said, the whole electoral election campaign was not free and fair. It was marred by irregularities. And one of the things that has not been reflected enough during this whole time is the fact that Mr. Yoweri Museveni was not supposed to be on the ballot this time around, except for a constitutional change that he orchestrated back in 2017, and it was a very bloody one. So it was the very first time that we were supposed to have the election where he's not on the ballot, and it was supposed to ensure a peaceful transfer of power. And then during the election campaign, we saw that the opposition were constantly harassed by security forces. For instance, on nomination day, Mr. Museveni had a very peaceful nomination, but then the main opposition candidates, that is Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, commonly known as Bobi Wine, and then the other opposition candidate for the Forum for Democratic Change, they were disturbed, or they were assaulted actually by security forces, and that was seen over and over again almost every day during the campaigns. They had to be stopped by police. They were stopped by police, beaten, arrested, tear gassed, and we even saw some deaths. So and then during the final rally, the Electoral Commission issued guidelines where these opposition candidates were not allowed to campaign in a number of places where they had so many voters. And ironically, just yesterday, President Yoweri Museveni ran through the same areas where he was thanking voters, and there were crowds that were following him, which contradicts the message that the Electoral Commission had issued for stopping the opposition candidates from campaigning in the same areas about the fear for spreading COVID-19. So when you factor up all these events leading to the process or the voting day, you clearly see that the process was not free and fair, and therefore the election cannot be called free and fair.
About the security around Bobi Wine's house, is it a sort of house arrest? Like he's not been allowed to leave his house, and then he said the military has actually surrounded his apartment, more than 400 soldiers, and then surrounding his house in Kampala and blocking journalists and party officials from meeting with him.
Yes, indeed, security operatives continue to surround the home of Bobi Wine. The official record that they've given is that they've received intelligence that his life might be in danger. Though from experience, we know that they often package their message so well that if you take it on the surface, it always seems logical until you check the other side of the story, which in this case has been that he's been denied, his visitors have not been allowed to have access to him, including journalists. And he has actually run to court in that effect. He's seeking to have himself freed from house arrest, as he has termed it. Just a few days ago, one of the former presidential candidates, who is actually also a former army general, Henry Tumkunde, also tried to visit Bobi Wine, and he was also denied access.
Right. Uganda's Electoral Commission said Museveni won 58.64% of the vote to Wine's 34.83%. Museveni has won 6 of the presidential elections held in Uganda since he seized power in 1986. Amelia, do you think he is the people's choice, or he was the first choice on the people?
That's not true, and in fact, almost all the results have been strongly contested by the candidates in court, most famously the 2001, 2006, and 2016 elections. But as we know, the courts always rule in favor of the incumbent because he's the one who nominates them and they are in his paycheck. And in fact, there was a time when an estranged army general came out to say that in 2006, the then strongest opposition candidate, who was Mr. Kizza Besigye of the Forum for Democratic Change, won the elections by close to 70%. But he says the army worked behind the scenes and they changed the results and they gave Mr. Museveni close to 58%, which made him the winner. And then when we look at the electoral process, in 2001, for instance, Besigye was falsely accused of rape, and that tarnished his name during the entire campaign process. Although the charges were later dropped, the damage had already been done. In 2006, he was accused of treason, and the charges were also dropped, but then that also disturbed his campaign process because he had to be in court and then on the campaign trail. And the trend has continued during all the electoral processes. As we see, the opposition candidates are blocked by police, they're tear gassed, and not given equal access to the voters, just like the incumbents. And then the other thing that is very common is that the opposition candidates do not have equal access to the voters or the same advantage as the incumbent, because Mr. Museveni always campaigns in two capacities, as a candidate and as the president. So he's launching factories here and then asking for votes here, which gives him an advantage over the others. And then there's something else about access to the media, and maybe we can also attribute it to his own intelligence because he knows how to campaign and how to make adverts. It's something that I observed, especially during this campaign. There are adverts on radio and on TV, so many adverts, while the other candidates do not have that. I do not know why. Maybe he has stronger PR machine than the other candidates do, but that definitely gives him an advantage. And then some of the other things that I've had people say is that we know that the vote is going to be stolen anyway, so out of apathy, if I may say, or maybe hopelessness, they just vote anyway because they know the vote is going to be stolen or something like that. So it's not because he's the people's choice or because he's unchallenged. And then there's also trust. And an unfortunate, for instance, I've been in Western Uganda, which is a part where Museveni comes from, and many people mistrust Mr. Chagulanyi Bobi Wine because he comes from Central Uganda. So they feel like if they vote someone from Central Uganda, then the Westerners are going to be marginalized, which is a very, very unfortunate trend.
Amelia, you spoke about trust. I would like to ask, because there was a statement that was actually issued out about Uganda's spokesman, that's a spokesperson for the Uganda's Electoral Commission. He said that the court is actually open for all aggrieved candidates from last week's presidential election and parliamentary election. Now, would you say as a journalist that that is a very fair statement to whoever that contested for Uganda's election? Do you think the law would be fair on anyone that goes to fight for his rights. And then it seems like a mockery. Do you think this is a sort of mockery against Bobi Wine? Because everyone knows that the court is, according to Bobi Wine, he said everyone knows that the court is undermined by Museveni. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, on the question of running to the courts to seek justice here in Uganda as it is, it's almost a waste of time concerning presidential elections. And like I mentioned, almost all results have been contested. If you look at, for instance, on the ruling from the 2001 and 2006 elections, some people say they are carbon copies. They're very, very similar, the rulings. The judges are nominated by the president, and it's understood that they're afraid to rule against him. So here in Uganda, we look at countries like Kenya and Malawi with envy, and we wonder, how do they do it? It would take a miracle, really, for Bobi Wine to attain anything from the courts of law. And you can consult FDC's Kiza Besigye on that, and he'll tell him as much.
Thank you very much, Amelia. Amelia Martha Naketimbo is a journalist from Uganda. We still very much have Victor Iwala in the studio. Now, Victor, you've actually heard all of the things she said. Now, let's talk about the security intelligence around Uganda. What are your thoughts on that?
You see, it's typical of what happens in Africa,
okay,
where the incumbent uses all infrastructure within his reach
okay,
to make sure he suppresses whoever that is coming up.
Okay.
So this is not actually different. And in Uganda, we don't expect anything different. That they are using 400...
Hold on a minute. Hold your thoughts. We don't expect anything different because it is still Africa?
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Not just Africa, actually, because it's still politics.
Okay.
And until we start having people who play politics without bitterness, politics with fairness.
Till date, Bobi Wine is still in his house.
Exactly. That's the point I'm going to. Now that they're having about 400 soldiers surrounding his house, it's funny. It amounts to using sledgehammer to kill a mosquito. Why? Is it war? What are they doing there? If the young man is aggrieved that you have taken his mandate, allow him to exercise his rights. He should go to court. He has the right to go to court, just like somebody said. I mean, it's his entitlement. But then what happens there is secondary. It's not for us to determine now.
You heard what Amelia said. She said there seems to be some trust issues in Uganda coming from President Museveni. Now, this man had been on seat since 1986. Till date. Now, I asked, is it the people's choice? She said, well, she gave examples of people coming from different regions.
You see, the issue is, even if he was the people's choice, the way he went about it has gone a very long way to demystify all that choice. The harassment that preceded the election itself, the denials, the fights here and there, pockets of issues all across Kampala and the rest of them, all points out that somebody was trying to coerce somebody into voting for him, or somebody is trying to coerce somebody into dropping out of the election. Now, if the young man mustered enough courage to follow it all through, down to the election, it means this man saw something in him. He was actually scared. So he may not also have been the people's choice. If he was the people's choice, he wouldn't be using all the infrastructure. But again, he will tell you that he had it at his disposal, so it's just his right to utilize the tools he has. But then, what I try to say is, if he was the people's choice, a lot of the harassments, a lot of the coercion, and a lot of the quarrels, a lot of the pocket fights here and there wouldn't have ensued.
Okay, all right. Let's go on a quick break. After this break, we would have Ejike Okpa with us discussing the new president of the United States of America, Joe Biden, and then also some of the rules made by Donald Trump that was actually revoked. That's the Trump-Pence administration. Just stick with us. We'll be right back.